My name is Gina Paulus, and I am a pregnancy and postpartum corrective exercise specialist. I'm here tonight to give a presentation on tightness in pelvic floor for adult gymnasts. Now, this information will be applicable to anybody, but I am going to throw in some specific cues and tips that are more geared towards an adult gymnast. So that's really the audience here. But like I said, it will be applicable for anybody. And you absolutely do not have to be a mother to have pelvic floor tightness. So everybody's welcome to listen to this and to benefit from the information. So I also will have a chat here in this call, and there should be a place for you to enter questions if you want to type them in instead of speaking them. And I can check that periodically and address your questions too. So for tonight's call, it's best if you can have some equipment on hand. So one thing that's going to be helpful is a looped band like this. You also can have a longer one that has little circles on the ends that will allow you to loop it around something really easily. We also want to have some sort of ball, whether that be a soft pinky ball or a tennis ball. That's going to be helpful. And then a chair. You can see behind me, there's a folding chair. It's also nice if we can have a slightly softer chair or surface. I've got some panel mats that will work for me, but if you are not in that type of setting, you can utilize a couch or a chair for that. We also want to have a foam roller, okay? Something like that's great. A yoga block. If you don't have a yoga block, a pillow can suffice. And then we'll want a place to put our feet against the wall. Now, no worries if you don't have access to all of this, but if you do, it's just going to allow you to practice what we're going to learn together that much more easily. So we are going to get started here with an exercise to help determine if we have a tight pelvic floor in the first place, because that's really the point, right? If we don't know if we have tightness, we're not going to know if we even need to hear this information. I have done a series of calls that are covering in more depth, determining whether or not you have tightness or weakness in pelvic floor. And I can put a link in that towards the end of the call in the chat for you guys. And I also will have that as part of the PDF that you'll get if you registered to be in the recording. If you did not register, you can pop your email into chat and I'll make sure you get all of that so that you can have access to all of that. But for today, we're going to pull out our chair to begin. If you don't have a chair, you can sit on the floor, but I do find it's easier to make these judgments on our body if we have the chair. All right, so we've got the chair and we're going to be sitting here. And what we need to do here is imagine like our body is a house and our pelvic floor, which is where our body contacts the chair, that's going to be your basement. Your first floor is approximately here on your body. Your second floor is here. Your third floor, fourth floor, and fifth floor is right at the base of your rib cage. Okay. And so what we're going to do next is just take a normal breath. I do want you to take a slightly deeper breath in that, it's a full, thorough breath, but I don't want you to do anything special. We're going to go ahead and do that right now. And on the second breath, what I'd like you to do is try to notice how deep on your body does that breath go. And take another one to make sure that you know where your breath is going. You should feel that part of your body just expand a little bit. Now, for me, I feel like it stops right around the first floor. It doesn't go all the way down. When I started doing some of this work on my body, I was probably around the third floor. I wasn't getting very deep. And I actually did have pelvic floor tightness. Not that I was aware that that's what it was called, but looking back, I definitely had the symptoms. So if you're able to get the breath to the basement, then that's great. You've achieved a healthy breathing system and you're getting that breath to the pelvic floor. If you are finding that your breath is stopping higher, then that is a sign that we have tightness. It's a quick and dirty test, but it's pretty accurate, and I will be going through in more detail other signs. But if you feel like you're not all the way down into that pelvic floor, you're going to be wanting to learn what we teach tonight. And so one thing that you need to know too is that your pelvic floor doesn't work in isolation. Your pelvic floor works in conjunction with your abs, and how it's supposed to work in a healthy system is your pelvic floor does the first 70% of the contraction, okay? And your abs are going to finish the 30% that's left. So what that means is if our pelvic floor isn't doing its job, which having a tight pelvic floor means it can't do its job because it's tired, the muscle's overworked, then our abs aren't going to be able to work as hard. And of course, in gymnastics, we need our abs to work. So regardless of any symptoms that you might experience that you know about, you're not going to have as strong of abs if your pelvic floor isn't the best it can be. So that's all the more reason to be interested in this subject. We also want to keep in mind that we have a front pelvic floor and a back pelvic floor. So a lot of people think about maybe they're leaking pee or that kind of thing. They're going to think about a tight pelvic floor, but that's actually referring to the front. We also have a rear pelvic floor. So our front pelvic floor, like I mentioned, oftentimes will have one major symptom that a lot of people want help with is that leaking symptom. That could be during your day. It could be in your sport. It could be both. And then the rear pelvic floor has a little bit different symptoms. Sometimes it's constipation. Sometimes it's trouble controlling gas. Sometimes it's that feeling like you have deep butt pain where you always want to do a pigeon stretch or a piriformis stretch, but yet you do the stretch and it doesn't fix the problem. So that is indicative of a tight rear pelvic floor. Now, like I was talking about earlier, if you have tightness, that means your muscle is overworked. If I walk around with my arm like this, especially holding something heavy all day long, guess what? My arm's going to get really tired and I'm going to lose functioning of my bicep in the front. My pelvic floor is the same way. If I'm overtaxing it, it's getting really tired and it's not going to be able to show up for you when you need it. There's a lot of reasons why this happens, which I'll be going over, and I will be presenting some do and don't exercises, including therapeutic things such as Kegels that you'll want to watch out for. So that is just kind of the overview of it, and I'll definitely be diving deeper into it. I also wanted you guys to know that your pelvic floor does other things besides controlling our P and our number 2 and our functioning of our pelvis. It also helps with intra-abdominal pressure. So when we're tunneling and vaulting, we need to keep a certain amount of pressure in our core. If we're unable to do that because our pelvic floor is dysfunctional, we're then going to be leaking power every time we punch, every time we block off our hands, every time we swing on bars. Obviously, we don't want that. So that's an important thing. Also, SI joint, our pelvic floor supports it. And if we don't have the correct balance of pelvic floor musculature, our SI joint is going to be apt to go out, to cause pain, and all of that. We also will have ramifications for our lumbar spine. So as I mentioned before, your pelvic floor and your abs work together. And if you're not getting that maximal effort from both, you're going to then be more likely to have lumbar pain or lower back pain. You also could have generalized pelvis pain. The other thing that pelvic floor helps us with is our posture. Because it's supporting our body from underneath, it's causing the foundation for the rest of our body. So if our posture isn't good, the pelvic floor could very well be a contributor to that. And then we also want to keep in mind how quickly or slowly our pelvic floor works. So our pelvic floor is actually going to be about 70% slow twitch muscle fibers and 30% fast twitch. That can be complicated if you're not a physical exercise or a kinesiology person, but all you really need to know with that is that we need to work both endurance and we need to work speed. So for just getting through your day, things like doing a floor routine, things like going to a long practice, those are more endurance. And our pelvic floor needs to have that endurance. But our pelvic floor also needs to be able to handle fast things, such as sneezing, slipping on ice and catching yourself, punching for a vault, right? Doing a cast on bars, doing a jump on beam. All of those things are going to require that fast action. And our pelvic floor has both the slow and the fast twitch. It is predominantly slow twitch, which is why a lot of our exercises will be a little bit slower for this. All right. And so I wanted to go over Kegels a bit with you guys because I know that it's kind of a buzzword. A lot of people have heard it. Maybe they think they know how to do it. But there's a little bit more nuance to it that I want to make sure everybody's familiar with. So we're going to go ahead and try that right now. So you can go back to your chair. You're going to have a seat there. And what we're going to do is we're going to identify our front pelvic floor. And to do that, what you can do is you can contract those muscles in the front and you're going to get a little bit of a lift. And then let that relax. Okay, now we're going to try the rear. So see if you can isolate that. Drawing the muscles up and then relaxing. Now, what a Kegel normally would be is it's going to be all. So you're going to do the front and the back. You're going to narrow the muscles by drawing the sides of your vagina closer together. And then you're going to lift the muscles up. So it's a two-step. You want to try to narrow and then draw up. So go ahead and work that. And then you can slowly relax. And then you can start thinking of it once you're used to that as a gather and a lift. So everything gathers together and lifts up. And then you want to fully relax. So the fully relax is the part where most people miss, and it's the part that people with tight pelvic floors really need to be careful about. So Kegels are technically not recommended while you're dealing with a super tight pelvic floor. I have had people who can work them and still make progress, but it's usually reserved to wait on that until we're able to do that first exercise we did of breathing all the way down into our pelvic floor. Practicing a couple isn't going to do any major harm or anything like that. But if you had trouble with breathing into your basement on that first exercise, I'm going to ask you to go easy and maybe skip some of these Kegels because I don't want you to tip yourself into greater tightness. Okay, I'm just wanting to introduce this information to you guys so that you can do it when your body is ready too. All right, so the other way we can think about with the Kegel is you can think of it like your pelvic floor is a napkin or a Kleenex, and it's going to pick up a blueberry that's under your body. So you'd obviously have to pull everything in or gather it, and then you lift and then fully relax. So doing Kegels can be fine as long as we can relax between. So I would absolutely not recommend doing them real quick if you're in pelvic floor tightness, but rather I'd have you focus a real lot on the relaxing and then monitor for symptoms. We'll be going through symptoms soon. If you do some Kegels and your symptoms worsen, then that means you're not a good candidate for Kegels right now. Don't push it, it's not worth it. All right, so the other thing you can think about once you're really good with fully contracting and fully relaxing the pelvic floor, you can check that too by repeating that basement exercise. Take a breath in. Did the breath make it to the basement? And breathe out. That can be your way of checking too. So say we've gotten through that. Here's what you can also work on for phase 2 or the more fancy Kegels. What you could do is you can work fast twitch ones. So for that, you're going to go contract, 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 hang up to maybe 10 of them, and then fully relax. So that one is, like I said, a little bit more advanced. That's going to work on your fast twitch. That's going to work on your pelvic floor showing up when you're doing things that are a little bit more demanding. Another direction you can take it is you can work on the endurance of your pelvic floor. So for that, we're going to hold 10-second contractions, fully relax, and then do that about 5 times. It might take you a bit to build up to that, but that's eventually what you would do. And so especially for a demanding sport like gymnastics, you're going to need a pretty strong pelvic floor, but you have to be a good candidate for it. And later on during this call, we'll be going through ways you can help your pelvic floor relax if you're not quite there yet. In the PDF I've included in the link here, you'll also be able to see all of this written out so that you can go back to it if your pelvic floor is in a better place in the future. The other thing that you want to make sure to keep in mind is that you're not squeezing your butt to do your Kegel. So a lot of people will start clenching their butt to try to force it and help themselves lift. That is not a good idea because that can cause that rear pelvic floor tightness, and that is absolutely not the direction we want to take this in. So take a moment to check in. You can palpate your glutes and just kind of make sure you're not squeezing them. Because I know too in gymnastics, we tend to over squeeze just because the coaches are always like tighter, 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 which is of course important for that sport, but we don't necessarily want to be doing that while we're doing our corrective exercise. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more information about Kegels. And I also wanted you guys to know that Kegels not only help with increasing muscular strength in the pelvic floor, but they also help us with awareness. They help us to understand what it feels like for those muscles to contract and what it feels like for them to relax. A lot of times the awareness is huge, and if we spend a little bit of time working that, then it can really pay off. So the other thing that I wanted to mention, and I promise I'll give a moment for questions in a second. I wanted to just make it clear to people that there can be varying causes of tightness. They can be that our pelvic floor muscles are overworked, which is primarily what I've been focusing on because I noticed that with gymnasts, that's usually the case. But sometimes it can be weakness. If we've given birth, if we've torn muscles or ligaments in our pubic area, if we have been on bed rest for whatever reason, and we now are getting back up on our feet again, if we haven't been eating sufficiently and we've lost muscle mass, all of these instances can be weakness. However, with gymnastics, I usually find that it's more of the overwork. Why are they overworked? It could be because you're lacking some strength in your abs, right? In your hip, in your glute, in your hamstrings. It could be that. It could also be that we don't have enough strength, and because we don't have enough strength in our pelvic floor, we're then going to need to do more in the way of doing our Kegels and things like that, and focusing on relaxing so that we can build up the muscles to be able to do what we're asking them. So there can be a variety of causes. And if you really want to know why, then you probably are going to have to see somebody like me who does the corrective exercise training, or you could seek out a pelvic floor physical therapist. That's a great resource too. If you need help finding these resources, you can send me an email. I'll actually put it in the chat right now, and I can help hook you up with how you could get in touch with whoever you might need, because sometimes it is nice to have somebody guiding you one-on-one. So Master's Gymnastics is my email, so that's there. Oh, and then one more thing too is our breathing patterns. So the other reason that our pelvic floor could be a little bit worse for the wear is if we don't have the best breathing patterns. Some of my earlier calls have covered that in depth, but for tonight, I'm just going to give you guys a quick tip on that. So when we breathe, if you put your hand, index finger against your ribcage, thumb way in the back, and you take a big breath in. If you felt your index finger and your thumb move, that means that you're getting a great, what we call 360 breath, meaning that the breath is filling up in a circular way. If you don't find that your finger and thumb move, that's a great thing for you to practice. The other thing you can take a look at is your shoulders. If you breathe and your shoulders go like this, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that pattern, right? Even if it's like that much, right? It's okay for your chest and sternum to rise a bit. We want that, but it shouldn't look like a, okay? That's not what we want. And that's a sign that your breath is not going down. We have 3 diaphragms in our body. We have one in our throat, one in our abdomen, and one in our pelvis. If you breathe in through your throat, that's going to push on your diaphragm, which is going to push down on the next diaphragm. This diaphragm is going to push on your guts, and then those guts are going to push into your pelvic floor diaphragm. Okay. If this diaphragm stays up, then we're not getting that. It's almost like a trampoline. It goes down and up. And if we're not stimulating that pelvic floor to drop down and then come back up, the pelvic floor is going to lose its touch. So we want to make sure that we do have nice, healthy breathing patterns. My first call in my series that you can get on the PDF will cover a lot of that, and you can go through those calls. Anything with diastasis recti will be really helpful for you. So does anybody have questions on what I've gone over so far? I'll check chat too. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to keep going here. So I did want to flesh out just a little bit more in the way of symptoms. And so here's some other symptoms that your pelvic floor could be in need of a little bit of TLC. You can have trouble starting to pee, or you can have what we call the second pee. What the second pee is when you go to pee and you think you're done, and then there's more pee. So that's a sign that your pelvic floor muscles were gripping, okay? Constipation, I had talked about that. So that's more the rear pelvic floor. If you have pain with penetration, that is not normal, and that's another sign. If you have more frequent UTIs, if you leak urine during anything, whether it be daily living or sport, if you have trouble controlling gas, if you have a heavy feeling in your pelvic area, if you have trouble doing a Kegel and you feel like you just can't get the contraction, if you have the shallow breathing that I mentioned, if you do Kegel, then it makes you worse. If you have SI, hip, or low back pain, any of those things might be a sign that your pelvic floor is tight, okay? Then you want to know, well, how do I decrease tightness, Gina? Well, I'll let you know. So there's ways to get manual release. That's going to be a service that you'll need an in-person pelvic floor physical therapist to help you with. You can find one. I actually have a way of looking up people that have done the same courses I have that I know are really good. So that can be a great resource, and they can sometimes teach you how to do it on yourself, which is really great because we all want to be able to do stuff on ourselves. You also could do the inhale, exhale, relax. So inhale, exhale, relax is just taking a moment. You're going to take your breath. As you exhale, you're going to focus on relaxing your pelvic floor, letting those muscles go. Since normally when we exhale, the pelvic floor comes up, if we're already what we call hypertonic or overly tight, That's a great way of practicing relaxing and releasing on that exhale. So that could be a nice thing to just do during your day, and nobody has to know that you're doing it. The other thing that you can do is just make sure you're not doing Kegels until your symptoms improve. You can also try something called reverse breathing. This is really good to do for easy exercises. So I would not recommend it for challenging conditioning stuff or rigorous workouts at the gym. But say you're doing something that's pretty easy for you, like a body weight squat, let's say that, right? So you're going to be ready for your body weight squat and you're going to do your squat. Now, normally what you would do with training of strength is you would do inhale as you go down and exhale as you come up. That's typical breathing, okay? Now, if you're working on helping your pelvic floor relax, you don't actually want to switch that. So you'd exhale as you go down, inhale up, exhale down, inhale up. And that's going to help down regulate your tension in your pelvic floor. Like I said, only for easy stuff though. Don't do that for like heavy weightlifting or challenging conditioning at gymnastics. The other thing you can do is spend a little bit more time meditating, whether that be just vegging out and lying there or sitting there without any special thoughts, or you could do that contract relax type of meditation where you purposefully engage the muscles of your pelvic floor and then relax them. So there's forms of meditation where we can do that throughout our body, where say we're lying down or seated or wherever we want to do, and we're going to say tense our arms and then relax them, tense our belly and relax it. And we're going through our body, and that can help teach our body to relax. So something like that can be really helpful. The also thing you want to do is make sure that you're strengthening surrounding muscles. So a lot of times people's pelvic floor is overworked because the muscles around the pelvic floor are not pulling their weight. So what we're looking at here is, how are your abs? How is your butt? How are your hips? How are your quads? How are your hamstrings? Those are going to be the main ones. Oh, and inner thighs too. Okay, so all those muscles have to be well, and they have to be balanced. If we have way stronger on one leg than the other, well, then that's going to cause problems. And that's a good candidate for saying that you might want to be really looking at your conditioning and making sure that you're keeping your body balanced, because obviously in gymnastics, we're going to be a little bit of our favorite side is stronger. So then having your nice balanced conditioning plan can be really helpful. I actually offer those for people too. That's something that's really important. If your coach isn't able to do that for you, like, find a resource that can. Shift Movement Science is a great resource. You can Google that and find Dave Tilley, and he has some awesome free information available too. I also have stuff on adult-gymnastics.com. There's a training tab where you can get lots of free stuff. All right, so moving along, the full body scan can be helpful. So sometimes we have weakness in our feet or in our shoulders, and those distal parts of our body or far away parts of our body can actually be impacting on our core and our pelvic floor. So having a professional who's capable of scanning you and kind of assessing what's going on can be really helpful. So I think that can be a great investment. We can also work on release poses. I will be going through these in our circuit, which will be coming up in a few minutes. But for example, child's pose can be really nice. I'll show you what I'm talking about. And then sending the breath to the pelvic floor in general, similar to what we did with the basement demonstration, where we breathed and tried to breathe into our basement. And so that can be a really good thing to do. If that one is a little bit tricky for you, you can always place your hands inside the hips like that. And what you can do is you can send the breath to your hands, because sometimes it can feel a little bit more threatening to try to send it to here. So sending the breath to your hands can be really nice, or you can also put a hand in front of your belly and one on your back. And just having that feedback of the hands can be really, really helpful if this is a troublesome area for you to improve with, okay? The other thing we can work on is our sits bones. So I'm going to grab my pelvis model here. Now, here's the pelvis. These are the bottom bones. And what can happen when we have pelvic floor tightness is we can have where the top is more open, and look at what happens to the bottom. And I'll show you. So if it comes in, the bottom opens. If the top comes in, the bottom opens. But if the top opens, the bottom comes in. And that's going to tend to cause more of the pelvic floor tightness. So when we go to sit down, if we can actually move our sit bones out of the way a bit to the sides, see how that kind of tips these in? And guess what happens when we have kids? The bones tip open to help support our pregnancy. Sometimes they don't go back. the way that we would want. So something like this can help. Also in athletics, when you're working really hard in your sport, a lot of sports will encourage our outlet to open the top. And so it can affect people who haven't had kids as well. So I'll show you what that looks like. You have your chair. You're simply going to grab a sit bone, grab the other sit bone, pull those sit bones apart as fast as you can, and have a seat. And then if you feel like you didn't really accomplish it, you can wiggle to one side, pull it out to the side, wiggle to the other side, pull it. You're not going to move them a lot. I mean, they're bones. They're not going to like really move tremendously. But if you can even pull them apart a millimeter or 2 millimeters, you're going to get that nice opening of your pelvic floor, and you can sit there for an hour if you're working or whatever and get that nice benefit without really having to do anything extra, which is really cool. So I love that one. The other thing, which I'm not a good example of right now, is tight clothing. So stuff, things like leggings, of course, leotards. Obviously, we sometimes might need to wear these things, but try not to hang out in them all day long if you don't have to, because tight clothes can trigger our pelvic floor to tighten. Okay, so we're going to get to exercises in 2 minutes, I promise. I just wanted to talk a brief amount about the one-sided pelvic floor tightness too. And we're actually going to take a moment and use our ball and going back to our chair. So what we're going to do is work on self-massage and self-release with the ball. This can be another great tool to help with pelvic floor tightness. All I'm going to do, and actually I'll show you this way first. I'm going to place the ball. Now here's my sit bone. I'm going to place it here, here, here. I'm basically making a circle around my sit bone. I'm going to do it way slower than that. But what I'm going to do is say place it somewhere and spend about 10 to 20 seconds. And then move it and spend more time. So I'm going to explore how it feels to release those areas of my pelvic floor. So this will take some time. We're not going to do it all together tonight, but I just wanted to introduce it to you, and you can try a few spots tonight and just see how you feel with this. You can try the other side and see if there's a difference. Most people do have a pretty dramatic difference from one side to the other. So of course you want to spend more time on that side. You can't really do this wrong. If you do it, over a few minutes, you're probably just getting to the point where you're wasting your time because you can only release so much at once. But you'll feel when it's done, when it's no longer helpful. And so doing this can be good. I actually really like using, I don't seem to have it tonight here, but there's a ball that's a pink one and it almost looks like an eraser. And that's actually my favorite ball to use. For some reason I can't find it tonight, but the tennis ball does work. And there's one more option. This is called the Courgeous ball, Courgeous, I think. So it's pretty soft. So this one can be pretty good too because it's softer. So you can do that on the chair. You can also use the softer Courgeous ball sitting on the floor. That can work pretty well. So that's a nice way to do it if you don't have access to that in person pelvic floor physical therapy. And especially if you feel tightness in your hips and hamstrings, sometimes it can really, really help. So it can be a nice thing to do before practice too. The other thing that you can work on is making sure you're not holding tension during your day. So when we tend to be stressed out for whatever reason, a lot of times we clench our muscles. Some people will notice that they clench their jaw. That's a really common way. You can clench your back, your chest. Some people can clench their belly and get an upset stomach. So a lot of people do clench their pelvic floor. So if you have moments of stress in your day, try to take a moment and just notice. If you're driving in traffic, are you unnecessarily clenching that? That can really go a long way to helping you unwind this pattern. And then lastly, I wanted to give you guys a quick tip that you can use with conditioning you might already be doing. So if you can use your yoga block and say you're doing a plank for gymnastics conditioning, or a push-up, anything where you're in that face down type position, you can place the block between your thighs and squeeze it. Okay. So while you're doing your planks for gymnastics, you're just going to squeeze that. I actually like it better when it's soft even. So like a foam block works really well. Squeezing a soft ball like this. And you can even do between your ankles as well. And just squeezing that, what that can do, while you're already doing conditioning, you'd be doing it anyway, is it can help with that pelvic spacing like I had showed before. So here's our pelvis. What happens when we squeeze something is we work our inner thighs. So these are the legs, right? And so say we're squeezing that, what we're doing there is we're actually encouraging the thigh to move toward the object. And what that's going to do is pull our, what we call the pelvic inlet on the top, more narrow, and it's going to widen the base. So we can do that anytime we're doing conditioning where we'd be normally squeezing our legs together, and that can help. Does anybody have any questions about that before we jump into our exercise circuit for tonight? Okay, awesome. So we're going to start with a relaxation circuit. It's 4 exercises. We're just going to do it once because we've got, up against time a little bit, and I don't want to keep people on all night long. But this one's going to have 4 moves in it, and it can be safe for anybody to do. It's great if you have pelvic floor tightness, if you sometimes have it and you just want to be, TLC for yourself. The first move we're going to do with this is a pigeon stretch. And this one's really good to help more the rear pelvic floor tightness. And so I will show you guys right now. So for this, you can have your knee out to the side, like so. And then you're going to gently place your body weight over your ankle. Some people like to do it with their elbows down and their head relaxed. You can do it up, like that. And if you do have pain or discomfort doing that, you can always do the kind where you instead have your ankle over your knee. And you can pull in that way. That can be a little bit gentler for people. So let's all just take a moment and pick the kind that we like the best and work on that. All right, I'll have you switch to the other side. We'll do a bit on that side too. So like I said, this is helping us relax the rear pelvic floor. And go ahead and take a few more seconds on the second side. All right, so next we're going to work on an exercise that helps open up the back of our hip as well. This one can also help with front pelvic floor tightness. So it's called an iliacus pullback with internal rotation. So the iliacus muscle is a muscle right inside of our hip, right in here. And it's going to be not super long. The psoas goes all the way down. This is a smaller muscle, and this muscle can help keep our hip in the socket. So our femur, our thigh bone in the socket in the place that it belongs. And so this can be really nice to help open up the hips. And so for this, I'll move this. We will be utilizing the wall and also a roller and a yoga block. So I'll start facing you guys. It's good to have a yoga block under your head just to help keep your head in line. And so we'll lie on our side. And then we'll be placing the foam roller between your knees. If you don't have a foam roller, you can put a pillow or a yoga block between your knees, but the foam roller is just nice because you can roll it and then it helps with the movement. So now we're going to take the foot that's on the wall and move it up a little bit. And you most certainly don't need sneakers for this. If anything, the sneakers aren't really the best. So barefoot's really good. I just happen to have these on right now, but they're not by any means essential. So what we're going to do now is press into the floor with our bottom side hip enough that we could slip our hand through so that we're holding our body up. We're going to take an inhale breath. And on the exhale, you're going to squeeze your roller. You're going to move this top side knee back just a millimeter. You're going to hold that. Breathe in again. Breathe out and draw your knee back. Without moving your pelvis, inhale. Exhale. Draw your knee back. And then you're going to relax for a second. So that's an iliacus pullback. It's a very subtle move. It can take some practice. So if you feel like you don't really get it right away, that's normal. We're going to try it one more time on this side. Okay, inhale breath. Exhale, squeeze and draw back. On your next inhale breath, make sure that you're sending air to your side and your back. Exhale, draw back. Make sure your feet don't move. Inhale again. Exhale, feel your femur, your thigh bone sliding back into the hip socket. And rest. So some people will report that they feel like an opening or an expansion in their back hip or their glute. That may or may not have happened for you, but it's definitely worth practicing and working on it, because once you get it, it's a pretty good feeling, and it's definitely worth sticking with it. So we're going to try the other side. I'll let you guys see me from the back so that you can see just how stacked I stay as I do this. We're going to lie on our right side, roller is there, foot is up high, feet stay parallel. Breathe into your back inside. Exhale, squeeze and draw back. Inhale again. Exhale, squeeze and draw back. Try not to let your back or pelvis move. Inhale again. Exhale, squeeze and draw back. Relax for a second. Make sure that you're stacked. Make sure that your legs are bent 90 degrees and go again. So left foot is up higher than your knee. Inhale. Exhale. Squeeze, draw back. Inhale. Exhale. Squeeze, draw back. Inhale. Exhale. Squeeze, draw back. And relax. It's common for one side to feel a lot different than the other, so don't worry if that has happened. But this can be really nice, especially for the rear pelvic floor. So the next one that we're going to do is a happy baby. There's different ways to do happy baby. I actually really like the kind on the wall, so I'm going to start by showing that to you. So for this one, you'll want to scoot really close to the wall. And then you'll place your soles of your foot close together. You can rest your wrists against your thighs and gently encourage them to open. And you're just really hanging out here and you're not doing much of anything. You're trying to let gravity just pull your legs down and open everything up. But the big thing is to just surrender to it. So having the wall can be a great option. And the wider your knees are, the better opener you're going to get. But if you don't have a wall, no worries. You can always grab your own feet. You can grab the outside, that's great. And again, you're just hanging out, taking natural breaths for a happy baby. You don't want to take big ones because that can cause your muscles to tighten up. So just natural breathing, allowing your legs to open. You can most certainly extend if that feels good. You can rock from side to side if that feels good. This one can be particularly helpful for those who have one-sided pelvic floor tightness. All right, so that's a great one. We can also do a variation of child's pose. And for child's pose, for the purposes of pelvic floor tightness, having wider knees can feel really good. So that kind of appearance there. You can go down, you can have palms up, forearms pretty parallel and head hanging. You can do a kind where you have your head down and your arms back. You can try arms forward. But in general, we want to have it be where we've got that wider knee set up. It doesn't have to be super wide. Even something like this can feel good. So that's going to be your child's pose. Go ahead and hang out in the version that feels best to you. And so these are really good moves to do either at the beginning of a workout if you are tight, or at the end of a workout if you want to make sure that you don't trigger tightness with your workout. So those four are a great relaxing circuit. They're all going to be listed in the PDF in case you want to refer back. Next, I'm going to show a beginner strength training circuit. There's 3 moves in this one. This one can be done if you have pelvic floor tightness, but sometimes it's going to make the tightness worse. So definitely monitor symptoms if you want to try them. And if you have actually a combination of pelvic floor tightness and weakness, this can help because if you can imagine a weaker pelvic floor, you're going to need some strength. right? Just a matter of balancing, building the strength with the tightness that can happen. So I'll show you one. This one I oftentimes do off of stairs, but I'm going to show you with the yoga blocks today just because I didn't necessarily tell you guys to have a staircase. It doesn't really matter. It's just that the stairs is a little bit less set up, I guess. So say I'm on a staircase or my yoga block, and here I am. I'm going to do an exercise called the hip hike. And I'll show you guys from the front too. But from the side, I'm starting out with my feet side by side. I'm gonna let my leg drop, and I'm doing that by my pelvis, allowing it to stretch my butt on the right a little bit. And then I'm going to pull up so that my foot is neutral again. Then I'm going to sink down. Oops. And then I'm going to come up. So I usually do these on a staircase and I hold on to the railing just because the point of this isn't really balance, it's to help your hip relax. But I wanted to show you guys with the yoga block tonight. So let me actually use this. So we've got something to hold on. So here I am with my neutral setup. I'm going to slowly let my hip sink. And then I'm going to press up. So these are called hip hikes. You want to keep the base leg knee pretty straight, but not locked out. And this one will help to relax on the way down, and it strengthens on the way up. Let's do one more on this leg. All right, let's switch sides. Okay, so balancing on that foot, starting neutral, letting it sink, letting my hips be askew, and then straightening. Letting it sink, and then pulling back. Feeling my glute lengthen as I sink. Feeling that glute engage as I pull up. Good. And sink. And pull up. Be careful not to over pull. We don't want to exceed the neutral. Sink. And pull up. And sink. Pull up. Let's do one more together. Sink. And pull up. So this one helps work our muscles of our hips as well as lengthen our glutes, which can be a cause of tight pelvic floor when our glutes are a little bit on the tighter side. So that one gets two things at once, which is pretty cool. The next one we're going to work on is airplanes. There's lots of ways to do airplanes. I'm going to start with the basics because this is a beginner circuit, like I said. For airplanes, it's really good to hold on to something. You're going to be pitched forward at your waist just a little bit, and you're going to have one foot back on your toes. Notice how my knee is pretty straight, but not completely locked. What I'm going to do now is spin open with my hips. Then I'm going to spin closed. And what I mean by that, just to show you guys from the front, that is closed. I'm closing off my left groin if my left leg's forward. Okay? So, keeping your core neutral, so I don't want your back wiggling or moving or arching or anything like that. Keep it neutral, and you're just driving this through your pelvis. Your upper body is just going along for the ride. Take your time. Keep your front leg knee over your midfoot. Keep that knee steady. Okay? As you spin closed, feel your glute stretching on the left side. As you spin open, you might feel your right front hip opening a little bit. Let's do one more. And definitely use the chair because it helps you to focus on what you're doing. If you're just trying to deal with balance, you're not going to get the stretch that we're after. So now we have our right leg forward. Check in that your knee is over your midfoot. Spin open. Spin it closed. Feel your groin being closed off. Make sure that your torso is coming along for the ride. Spin open. Spin closed. Spin open. Spin closed. Notice how my heel comes up when I close and it starts to settle towards the ground when I open. Make sure that that knee is staying in its spot, right over that midfoot. Let's try one more. All right. So that's another great one to help with our hip mobility and help with the functioning of our kinetic chain, as we call it, so that all of our muscles near our pelvic floor are doing a great job. And then we're going to work on hip thrusts with our loop. So this is the one that the soft chair can come in handy. Yeah, I'll just show you guys that way. And so I'll have my loop. I'm going to place my back right on those panel mats. You're going to have the loop right around your lower thighs, right above your knee. We are going to walk our body off of the surface until it's just your shoulder blades against the edge. All right, so first thing we're going to do is think about pubic bone comes up just a little bit, ribs drop down, and we're keeping a connection between our pubic bone and our ribs. What I mean by that is I don't want you doing that as you do this. So none of that, it's going to stay steady. So I'm going to pivot against my shoulder blades, my hips drop. I'm pressing my knees out. Come up. Don't do that. That's not what we're doing. We're keeping our core neutral, okay? I want you to drive this through your hips, not your spine. Come down. Come up as far as you can without letting your back arch. Look at your knees. Come down. Come up. And back down. Take it slow. 3 seconds down and 3 up is really good. And you can also try some pulses. So on the next one, when we get to the top, we're going to try some pulses, 1-inch ones, just like that. Okay. If you find that the loop isn't doing a lot for you, try 2 or try a stiffer loop. We want to keep our toes parallel to each other. All right, you can come out. So that's a great one to help strengthen our glutes, and glutes are one of the reasons why our pelvic floor is going to tip into overwork. So that finishes up our beginning strength series. I do have 3 moves for you to finish up the call tonight, and they're going to be our advanced, actually, I'm sorry, just 2 moves. They're going to be our advanced strengthening. I do not suggest doing this unless you can get your breath down to the first floor or the basement when we did that breathing test at the beginning. Otherwise, just please watch and make note for the future. You can try them. So the first one we're going to do is a movement called a lunge rotation. And for this, it is nice to have a resistance band attached to something. And then you want to have that coming from your side. So I'm going to work my left leg forward and the band is coming from my left. And what I'm going to do is, let me actually move this back just a little bit so that the view is better. So like I said, the band comes from my left. Left foot is forward, I'm in a lunge. My right foot is back. Now, I'm starting with my hands in front of my belly button. What I'm going to do is I'm going to twist toward my band as I bend both legs. I'm going to come up, twist. Notice how my groin gets closed off, just like on the airplanes. Come up, but now I'm doing it against resistance, which is harder. Twist down. Come up, twist down, come up. My arms aren't moving any extra. They're just going along for the ride. Last one. Okay. We're going to spin around and try the other side. So now right leg is forward, holding the band in front of you. Okay, and twist toward the band, come back up. 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 Twist toward the band, back up, and last one. All right. So why a movement like that is really nice is because it helps us to get into a different plane of motion than we often do. So if we're doing moves where we're just going forward and back, say like a regular lunge, right? Like that, we are working what we call the sagittal plane. That is the most common plane for us to do our conditioning, our skills, and life. If we're going to do that rotating lunge, we're going to be working in the transverse plane, which is great because that is the twisting plane. We definitely use that in gymnastics, but we tend to have a favorite side, so we don't always get to twist in both directions. We also have the frontal plane, which is more of, let's move sideways, okay, something like that. That one can be great to work in too. And we are going to do some other exercises in future calls where we'll be covering more of those. But for tonight, we're just going to finish up with our other advanced pelvic floor move. And for this, it is actually best if you can have the band attached at hip height I don't have a good setup for that for this call, but I have it a little bit lower, which is still reasonable enough to do. But if you can have it attached hip height, that can be really good. My shoe. All right, so what we're gonna work on is a single leg stiff leg deadlift here. Let me actually get there. So you'll notice I have the band around just above my knee, and it's pulling me that way. Okay, I'm balancing my leg. And then I want to have my free leg in the front. So what I'm going to do now is keeping this knee soft. I'm going to come down. Oops. You want to try not to let it tip you over. So I usually look at a spot on the floor about 5 feet in front of me. And I was trying to look at the camera, which was not helpful. But now I'm going to try to look at my spot and see how I can do. So I am hinging at my waist. Then I'm coming up, all while letting the band pull me that way. So what that's doing for me is it's really helping work my inner thigh. It's helping work my pelvic floor muscles, and it's helping work my hip and glute. So on the other side, I'm actually going to show you guys without the band, just because I want to be able to give you the best angle from the side as well. So now that you understand, you want the band coming from your right side for the right leg, which is what we're doing next. So you can take a look at me. And what I'll do here, so you'll just imagine that I've got the band pulling that way, and then I'm going to show you this. So you'll see that my knee stays slightly bent. When I bend over, it's almost like my body's a seesaw, where when my shoulders come down, my leg goes up. And I always end with my knee in front. That actually helps work your glute as well, a little bit more. So bending down, coming up. This can be done with weights as well. I recommend getting used to it without the weights first. And then you can consider holding a weight in each hand or holding a weight in one hand to help yourself with a little bit more stimulation and challenge. But I definitely recommend starting with the band, especially with just your body weight. So those last two can be really helpful for more advanced pelvic floor strengthening once you're doing a great job getting your breath all the way down into your basement of your pelvic floor. So that was my circuit. I do suggest doing more of the moves twice, especially from the beginning strength as well as the advanced strength. The release moves, you could do more as needed. You don't necessarily have to follow a schedule with those. So that was it for the workout piece. And now that you know them, you can hopefully, run through them quick, and you don't necessarily have to take as long once you're familiar with what they are. I also have video of all these exercises on my YouTube channel. It's at Homebodies Fit, and I'll type that into the chat as well. That can be a nice resource. You can search it using a computer, not a phone, unfortunately. I don't know why YouTube doesn't let us use phones to search. Doesn't really make sense to me. But anyway, so that was it. Does anybody have questions about any of the workout exercises or about this topic in general? All right, looks like we're good. And then somebody just, it was very helpful. Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad that you found it helpful. So I always get people rewatching these. I know that people really enjoy them. I know it can be hard to get to something live, especially like right now in my town, we're actually under a nor'easter and there's like snow everywhere. So I get that like it's hard, but I really am happy that the recording can be enjoyed by people and used by people in the future too. So whether you're watching live or whether you're watching later, I really appreciate your presence and your, interest in this topic. I'm here to help people, and I am really appreciative that there's people that want to hear what I have to say. So I will follow up with the email PDF with more information for you guys, and hopefully it will be helpful for you. And then just keeping your eyes peeled for the future calls. We'll have some more topics on pelvic floor, and we'll have more topics to help your gymnastics in general. So look out for that, and I hope everybody has a great night. Bye.